Good morning. Get some coffee. Good morning, everyone. I am Stacy. This is Loving My Veteran, and we are walking in my shoes this morning. So it's time to get a little coffee and kind of get started. I'm 2 minutes late. Imagine that. Um, but we're going to start our day out this morning. I'll give a few people a minute or two to pop on here. Good morning, sunshine. Sister Michelle. Um, we're 2 days away from 9/11. And good morning, Pamela. We're 2 days away from 9/11. And for all of us, we all have our own memories of 9/11. And we've heard over and over again the veterans' perspective. You know, what do you think our veterans feel? How do you think our veterans feel? How do you think our veterans feel? This is a trigger moment for them. This is a trigger moment for a lot of people, not just our veterans. This is a trigger for a lot of us. 9/11 is like a nationwide trigger for us. It people who were in those towers made up every race, every gender, every sexual orientation, every religious belief, and we watched as a country symbols, world trade collapse. So 9/11 affects more than just our veteran world. And I think that also often we get so busy concentrating on how is it affecting our veteran? How is our veteran handling it? What can we do to mitigate the issues with our veteran? I think that there's times we have to sit back. Good morning, Sarah Kim. We have to sit back and we have to say, how is it affecting us? What does it do to us every day? What does 9/11 feel like for us? Because we again can't be good for anybody if we're not good for ourselves. There's so much on TV this week about 9/11 and 9/11 and talking to the dispatchers or the women of 9/11. Um, there's so much on it that it is in our face all the time again. Personally, for me, 9/11 is a massive trigger. It is a trigger to my own PTSD. It is not something that I've had this trigger forever, over 20 years. It is not something I just developed from being with my veteran. Morning, Sue. It is a trigger that I personally have. So how do you overcome that trigger? How do we best take care of ourselves? What do we do? How do we get through this individually? Because we have to take care of ourselves. We will find that for all of us, we'll handle it differently because we all do. Some of us ignore it completely, and that's okay. I know for me, I get very wrapped up in the memories. I think about the Tower to Tower Foundation and the New York firefighter who turned around. He had gotten off shift and turned around and came back. Our tunnels to tower. Good morning, Erica. And how he turned around and he was at the tunnel and turned around and came back to the towers as a firefighter doing his job, and he ended up losing his life. And the positive that's come out of that. So I think about those things. I think about those children that were sitting in the classroom with President Bush at the time when they whispered in his ear, and this man had to keep his composure and finish reading him a book. You know, I think about the people who were on planes, and how planes were suddenly grounded, and the panic and those are triggers as us as a nation. So they're not just a veteran trigger. That wasn't actually a military event. It was an attack on our country, don't get me wrong. But that wasn't a military event. That wasn't like a specific military event. That was a country event. That was a global event. And it affected all of us so differently. So we have to make sure that before we get into worrying about our veteran and how is our veteran doing, how are we doing? I'm not real good. I'm going to be honest. I'm not real good. I know that I can remember my mom took me, we went to a Redskin football game, and I'm a diehard Washington Redskin fan. And we were in FedEx Field, which was right there by the Pentagon. And we went to a Monday night football game, and it was on 9/11. And the fighter jets flew over the top of the stadium in their formation, and it was part of the show. But what I also remember very vividly were the number of fighter jets, good morning, Haley, and helicopters that flew in circles around the stadium because it became a potential target. And when you sit back and you think about that kind of fear, you know, all I wanted to do was watch the Redskin game. All my mama wanted to do was watch Terry Bradshaw, who was hosting Monday Night Football that day. And he was kind of sitting down in front of us, right? But what did I pay attention to? The thing I remember about the game was the helicopters flying around and the fear that I had at that moment. So I think we all experience those fears. We all wonder what's next. And I saw a news article last night that I know I've shared with Michelle that some of the people coming from Afghanistan that left and came here, and they're detaining them, or not detaining them, they're housing them on military bases till they get processed. There's some of them don't even have IDs. And instead of keeping them there till they can be vetted, there are actual eyewitness reports, video, the whole 9 yards, of them Ubering to the mall in DC. That scared me. That put me in a panic mode. I couldn't sleep for hours because of that. Because I'm worried what's going to happen to us as a country. Are we going to go back to that feeling? Are we going to go back to that terror? Is somebody else going to lose their life? And then, secondary to my emotions becomes, if that happens, what's going to happen to Carl? What's going to happen to my veteran? How is he going to react? How prepared am I going to be? And this is going to be probably the 2 or 3 days of total disconnect that we have, and we have to fight harder to communicate better because of it. I know that last year, and we didn't have all the stuff going on in the world last year that we had right now, but I know that last year, good morning, Meredith, last year it was very tough for me. I process 9/11 completely different than he does. And so I needed, right, yeah, having a veteran firefighter spouse, our house is struggling this week. I don't realize, Erica, how much my behavior changes until probably this year, where I'm so much more aware. I'm so much more aware of what, of my own feelings all of a sudden. But I process things very differently. I am the firefighter paramedic who watches it all because that's what we've done. I'm that person that watches it all. And that's how I become so involved, because I'm such the people person. I want to see the stories and the tragedies and I can even look for the triumphs and the tragedies, you know, and that's just who I am. Carl looks at it differently. It's more like a mission, and so he doesn't want something that's going to trigger him. And so, sorry, I got to turn my thing off. Sorry. I have a message from Janine. So it was tough for me, and how we process things are so different. And that's going to be the same in every side. America says they already have a plan. They've come up with a game plan. And I have two in my own mind, and I think Carl and I are going to talk about it a little more. Um, but the reality is that we have to face is that one attack on 9/11, a second one this year, would totally send us into a chaotic state. And so I always have that fear. You know, Nakia's on high alert. I think we're all on high alert. We pay more attention to what is going on. We are more vulnerable than ever. Um, we are more vulnerable than ever. Um, Last year, because of COVID, they wouldn't let them have the memorial service where they read the names and you know rang the bell after each one. They wouldn't let them do that last year. So last year we posted on the page the reading of the names from the year before, and Facebook was going to shut the page down. They said it was too political in nature. Um, but those names mean something to me. They're somebody's mother or father or child, and I thought it was such a great way to honor them. And that just broke my heart. So 9/11 is very tough for me personally. So how do we cope with that? First of all, I think you need to take time and process your own feelings of 9/11. I think you have to become aware of your fears, aware of your anxieties, aware of what your triggers are personally, um, how you feel about that. You have to process that. You have to understand and be honest about that. And then, just like Mary said, you've got to sit down and talk to your spouse and make a game plan. Talk to him about or her about how you feel. Um, that was such a horrific thing that it when you look at the representations of what was bombed, the World Trade Center, we were the leader in world trade. The World Trade Centers collapsed. The Pentagon, the head of our defense, safest building in the country, probably in the world, so it's marketed, it had a big hole out of it. The third plane that landed in Pennsylvania was going to hit the Capitol. So you're talking about our defense, our very lawmakers, and our world trade, and how it totally just everything we as the United States were represented as was destroyed. The icons of that were destroyed in those moments. But again, when I have to go back and how I cope with it is I go back and I look at the positive that came out of it. Yes, there were a ton of lives lost. Yes, there was a lot that was affected. But I look at the blessing stories. I look at the people that lined up to donate blood. I look at the people who just fed firefighters and first responders all over the country meals. I remember 108 Minutes that changed America. Best documentary ever. Um, but anyway, firefighters were running and going door to door, and it was after the collapse, and they got into a business lobby or an apartment lobby, or somebody had a cell phone that worked, and one firefighter got the call out to his wife that he was okay. And the other three firefighters, because cell service was so spotty, were not sure they could get out. So he asked her to please call their wives and tell them they're okay. But those are the stories, and those are the things that give me hope to let me go on, because I can sit here and I can wallow in it. And 9/11 is a massive trigger for me. It is a massive trigger for me. But I look at the stories of hope. So I think, again, that's where we have to stay hyper aware, stay hyper vigilant, because the reality is that is something that we do. We need to be vigilant, but we also need to look at it from how did it bring us together as a country? We were typically, in the eyes of the world, you took out the icons and the representatives. Um, you took out those icons and those representatives, um, the things that represented our country, and it was okay, and we got through it. Um, so yeah, when the Memorial Park, where Flight 93 came in, you actually hear the black box, and it's pretty tough. Um, but those are the things we remember. In amongst that tragedy, we became together and became one of the greatest nations in the world because of that tragedy. So, can we look at that positive? Can we find that positive in our lives? Can we focus on that positive? Maybe you and your veteran need to find something to do together that that is a comfort for both of you. You know, see, Sarah Kim says that they're going to go to a concert. Um, I know that for us, we're not going to be in public. It's just not going to happen. I can't do it. I physically can't do it. Carl may be able to do it. I can't do it. I need to be home in my safe zone, in my confines of my home. That's where I need to be. But I also know that just like our veterans do, whenever there's a crisis, every inkling of my being is going to say, if something happens, pack your shit and go. And that's another thing I have to fight, because the reality is I'm not going to pack my shit and go. Okay? That is awesome. Make goodie baskets for all the first responders in your in her community. That's amazing. Thank you, Meredith. From a first responder, thank you. Thank you. Um, but every inkling is yeah, I told you I was going to come watch and play soccer, but I wasn't coming that day. Um, every inkling of my being, just it tears me apart inside. But you have to look at the good, and where did we come from, and how did we pick ourselves up and go forward, and look at the good that comes out of the tragedy. I am struggling. And it is very important that when we are struggling, we admit, whether we admit it to our veteran, which we should, we need that, learn that communication, or whether we admit it to somebody else who can uplift us, whether it's pray for us or just listen to us vent or whatever it may be. I am struggling. I am struggling with 9/11. I have a fear of 9/11. Maybe it's because I've stood outside the World Trade Centers before they collapsed. Maybe it's because I've been to DC and stood outside the Pentagon. Maybe it's because I was a firefighter and a first responder and a paramedic. Maybe it's because I knew somebody who died. Maybe it's because the reality came back to me that those firefighters were doing their job, and that could have happened to anybody. Those people who went in to do their job at work, that could have happened to any of us. And I think that was the reality of why I struggle. I struggle with 9/11. It is truly what it is. But I will tell you this, and Erica, thank you for that, because this is where I was going. The definition of terrorism isn't necessarily flying a plane into a building. You can fly a plane into an empty building all day long, and it's not terror. Terror is fear. Terror is fear. Terrorism is fear. And when we let fear take over who we are, and fear take over our lives, then we become a victim of terrorism, period. Okay? Girl, I'll be the one eating your cookies and your baked goods, okay? Thank you, because that's how I cope. I like stress eat. I probably gained 20 pounds stress eating. But that's what terror is. Terror is fear. It is creating a sense of fear. So when we learn to face things head on and understand that this is a difficult time for us and we are afraid and we are concerned of future attacks and we are this, being hyper aware is being prepared. Okay? Being aware of your surroundings is being prepared. That is preparedness. It's not fear, it's prepared. But fear, where you are paralyzed and cannot do, girl, always. And you cannot do stuff. When you live in that moment that you can't get out of bed because of fear, when you can't walk out the door because of fear, when you are so consumed with something that is fear, that is the definition of terrorism. That's it. So we getting ourselves wrapped up in a state of 9/11, remembering, honoring, knowing, being hyper aware, being hyper vigilant, whatever your mode is to cope, whether it's praying for our country, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's whatever, however you deal with it spiritually, getting yourself prepared and together where you understand that any information in the news you get can be turned and twisted. I send it to you, Meredith. Anything that gets turned or twisted that we take that creates a sense of unmovable fear. We all have fears. Terrorism is unmovable fear. When we love to learn in that moment, we become terrorized, and that terror takes over our lives, and that's terrorism. Bottom line. Bottom line. You know, we see it, we think of groups like ISIS and the Taliban and all the other ones as terroristic groups. But how do you think the people in Portland felt when they're riding up in the street and they're taking in, they're locking things down, and the people who lived in there that didn't want anything to do with it, now they're living in a locked in little place? Don't you think they experienced fear? That was terror. That's terrorism. The kids that shoot up a school, that's terrorism. The guy that shoots up the movie theater, that's terrorism. The guy that was on top of the hotel at Vegas that shot out in the concert, that's terrorism. It is a fear that you create. That's what it is. So we have control over our emotions. Am I having a hard time processing this? Yes. Is it tough for me? Yes. Are the memories going to come flooding back? Absolutely. Am I going to think about all those first responders' families who don't have them anymore because they did their job? Yeah, I am. Am I going to think about the ones that survived and couldn't save their buddies? Absolutely. I'm going to remember and honor them. But you can't live in fear, because that becomes terrorism. That becomes total terrorism. Period. That's what it is. So learning that fear is an emotion that we all have is livable. Learning to manage it. Otherwise, it becomes terror. and we give into our fear. So what are you doing personally to deal with your fear? How many of you are sucking it up and dealing with it and not talking about it? How many of you are acting like it's just another day because you're so worried about your veteran? How many of you think your fears don't matter or your anxiety over 9/11 doesn't matter? Okay? How hard is it? It is hard. But I like what Meredith and them are doing. How are we honoring those who fell? How are we honoring our fallen? Are we doing something to keep living? Are we doing something for them to keep on living? Are we honoring them in a positive way? Because we all have struggles. So rather than get caught up in our struggle, let's do something positive to honor. It's a positive thing to honor. Sorry, I have to have coffee. I go back and I think about my mom. Y'all know I think my mom is like my superhero woman, right? My dad died of mesothelioma, which is a cancer caused by asbestos, and he just did it from building ships and carriers in the shipyard forever. And it was not a pretty battle, but my dad fought gallantly. And when it was over, my mom has talked to other families who are going through asbestos and mesothelioma. My mother is a quilter, and she makes quilts from the scraps of all this stuff that they've done. She makes lap quilts, and she takes them to her cancer doctor, and from where even my mom had breast cancer, and she says, here's some quilts, give them to the cancer patients who need it. And last time she went, one of them said, the doctor said, Linda, thank goodness we have someone who has no family and just needs love wrapped around her. And every one of them on the inside, on a little label, says it was stitched with love. And this woman has worn hers out, being wrapped up in this love. So here's this tragedy. My dad dies of mesothelioma. My mom is a breast cancer survivor. Horrible, has gone through it to get it done and survived it. And she counsels other people who have either lost a spouse, she talks to them, or who have mesothelioma and are going to go through a really horrific time. And she makes quilts for people going through cancer treatment. And so here she took this tragedy in her life and she turned it around to something positive. Just like Meredith was talking about, they do cookies. They do stuff for their first responders. They do this. Yes, we can get consumed in what is going on in 9/11 and that terror that we have and can totally wrap ourselves around it. But the other thing we can do is we can sit here and come together and live forward, because when we live for people, we honor them. When we live in spite of them being gone, we honor them. I remember the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. We had a police officer who we all adored in Savannah, who was shot and killed in the line of duty. And there was a lot of guilt by first responders that didn't get to him in time and whatever. And the truth is, the man, from the time the bullet hit him, was a fatal wound. Okay, these people from Tunnel to Towers showed up within 2 days and said, we're here for you and we love you, and by the way, here's a check for your mortgage. You are now mortgage free. And I remember this was such a tragedy. This guy lost his brother in the trade center, right? He was a firefighter and he lost his brother, and they formed this organization for military and first responders to be able to come in and say, Here, your mortgage is paid for. I know it doesn't bring him back, but it's one less thing you have to worry about. And so we can all do that. We can all take the tragedy that we think about, the terroristic moment that we think about. We can take that tragedy and we can utilize it for good. Meredith making cookies. Stephanie is going to a soccer game full of kids, right? And just being able to celebrate at the soccer field and celebrate the fact that they have that freedom to play soccer on a soccer field, and make them aware, make her own children very aware of, you have this freedom because you live in this country and you have this freedom. And 9/11 was a very horrible event where some really bad people did some really bad things, but as a country we're still here. And that needs to become our mindset. There's some really crappy things in the world, but we're all still here. We're all still here. Y'all realize we are from all over the country. We have followers in 14 countries: Canada, England, Brazil, New Zealand. We have followers all over there. And we have this opportunity to come together and still do good in spite of horrible things. And that is how you fight terrorism. You get over your fears by coming together and doing things that are positive. By making something positive out of something negative. Living, yes, some of our veterans have a really hard time. They've lost a buddy. And some of them wallow in that. But then you have people like Kurt Power, who goes around this country and tells them, never stop fighting. Don't stop fighting. He's taken the negative and he's completely turned it around and saved God knows how many lives, because he says, don't stop fighting. So in reality, he's living for his buddies. And that's where we need to be today. Take account of how 9/11 affects you. Talk about it. Share it. How can you do something positive with your own negative? Doesn't mean you can't watch the TV shows that you always watch to deal with it. Doesn't mean that you can't do the things you've always done. But don't live in fear. Don't let the terrorist win. Don't let that part of terror take over our lives. We are better than that. I do struggle with 9/11. I will always struggle with 9/11. I will always carry guilt for not being there. Of course, probably every first responder in the country has that guilt. But what were we all supposed to do? Be hanging out at the Pentagon and the World Trade Center when we knew that nobody knew it was going to happen there? We were just all supposed to be hanging out there? No, it can't happen, and that's the reality we all have to come through. It's the reality we all have to face. I'll always carry that. But I also know that God left me here. God left me here for a purpose. I'm here for a purpose. Don't know what that purpose is always, but I'm here for a purpose. You're all here for a purpose. Okay? We all here are here for a purpose. That's what we're here for. We don't know why we've overcome our tragedies, but we've all done it. We've all had personal tragedies we've overcome to be here for a purpose. A purpose that is much greater than us. We don't know what that is. I don't know why God said, Stacy, you're going to stay alive and we're going to figure it out. I don't know that. Sometimes I wonder, do I even make a difference? We all do that. We all like, oh my God, do I really make a difference? Well, here I am. I'm running to the soccer field for the 20th time this week. Is it making a difference? And then your child comes back with that first place medal, and you're like, absolutely, because you can't take that look away ever. And that's what we do. So I want y'all to know that 9/11 is tough for us too. It's not always about our veteran, it's about us too. And sometimes we have to put aside their feelings to get a grip on ours. Put aside their feelings to get a handle on ours. Because we're not good for anybody if we're not good for ourselves first. We're all going to get through this tragedy together. We're all going to walk out through the other side stronger because of it. God knows if there's a terrorism attack, it's not going to be pretty. But again, we will get through that like we've done over and over again. Don't live your life in fear. Don't spend your life in fear. Fear is terror. Terror is terrorism, no matter who causes it. So I just want y'all to know, if you don't mind an extra little prayer to keep me in your prayers through my 9/11 thing, because it is my trigger of all triggers. Get me through that would make me grateful. It's just one of those things that I deal with. I want y'all to reach out to each other. We have really been staying in check on this page. I am so proud of this group of people that have uplifted each other through this page and seeing the positives come out. We've had some last minute, my board's going to kill me, so I might as well just tell them on a public forum so they don't kill me. We've had some last minute registrations to boot camp. Boot camp is now officially closed. More letters are going to be going out about boot camp today. Surveys, boot camp surveys went out. We also did a conflict survey, which I'll explain more on next week, on how we deal with confrontation. So we're going to do a lot more of those kind of surveys to try to, I can sit here and talk about things till I'm blue in the face, but if it doesn't relate to how you feel, it's not worth anything. So we're going to kind of get a little more of y'all's temperature and what you think we need to address. I know Miss Nakia asked me to address the 9/11, so I sucked it up today, and I'll do it again tomorrow. Tomorrow we are going to talk about 9/11 from the veterans' perspective and how it is also triggering them and how we can deal with some of their triggers as well. But today, y'all take care of your own triggers. Take care of you, your own fears. Think about it. Journal it. Write it down. Whatever works for you. I am the writer and the journaler. That's what I do. So, also, do not forget, open our heart for our Purple Heart veteran. We are gladly taking donations. We are coming right along with that. So I want y'all to have a very... oh, holy moly. My son hadn't talked to me in 3 days is talking to me. Anyway, miracles. See, terrorism is over. The miracle just happened up in my life. Y'all have a blessed day. I am Stacy. This has been Walking in My Shoes, and we are loving my veteran, and I love this community. Y'all be blessed. Bye.